Texas Canyon Lake was never meant to disappear. It was designed to be controlled. A reservoir that stores water, releases it when needed, and stays stable through changing seasons. For decades, that system worked. But now, the balance is shifting. The lake is dropping again, not suddenly, but steadily. Water levels falling faster than they recover. Losses measured not in inches, but in millions of gallons each day. And this isn't the first time it's happened. Just miles away, another lake followed the same pattern and never came back. What's happening to Canyon Lake isn't random. It's part of a larger system that is no longer holding the way it used to, and that changes what this really is.
The Army Corps of Engineers showed up to explain why Canyon Lake even exists, and hint, it wasn't built so your pontoon boat could have a summer home. It was built for flood control and...
Canyon Lake sits in the Texas Hill Country, about 40 miles north of San Antonio, built in the 1960s as a reservoir designed for control. Not just storage, but regulation. It was created to manage floods, supply drinking water, and maintain a steady, predictable balance between inflow and outflow. For decades, that balance held. Reservoirs like Canyon Lake are engineered systems. Water flows in from rainfall and river systems, primarily the Guadalupe River. Water flows out through controlled releases, evaporation, and usage by surrounding communities. When functioning properly, those inputs and outputs stay within a range that keeps the lake relatively stable over time. But that balance depends on one assumption, that the system refills. Right now, that assumption is under pressure.
The lake level here at Canyon Lake is so low that if the lake was 100% full, those trucks up on the hill would be completely underwater.
The levels are so low that Cranes Mill Marina had to move its entire marina 1,000 feet out to stay in.
As of 2026, Canyon Lake is sitting at roughly 58% of its capacity, more than 20 feet below its normal conservation level. That alone is not unprecedented. Reservoirs fluctuate, droughts happen. But what makes this different is not just the level, it's the pattern. The lake dropped to historic lows in 2025, reaching around 45% capacity, the lowest level recorded since it was first filled. Then, after heavy flooding in July, it recovered temporarily, rising back toward nearly 70%. On the surface, that looked like a reset, a system correcting itself. But the recovery didn't hold. By early 2026, the decline had started again, and this time, it came with a measurable trend. On average, the lake has been losing more than 100 acre-feet of water per day, over 30 million gallons, not as a one-time event, but as a sustained rate. That loss includes evaporation, controlled releases, and ongoing water use. But the key detail is what's missing on the other side, enough incoming water to offset it. Climatologists and water managers across Texas have been tracking this shift closely. The region has been in prolonged drought conditions, with rainfall deficits building over multiple years. According to data from drought monitoring agencies, parts of the area have experienced extended periods classified as extreme drought, meaning not just below average rainfall, but conditions that begin to affect infrastructure, supply systems, and long-term water availability. Robert Mace, a leading water expert in Texas, has pointed out that what the state is facing is not just a short-term dry period, but a growing mismatch between water supply and demand. Not a sudden failure, but a gradual imbalance. And that imbalance doesn't stay contained within one lake, because Canyon Lake is not the only system operating under these conditions. Not far from here, another reservoir followed the same pattern, until it stopped recovering altogether. That pattern becomes clearer when you stop looking at Canyon Lake as an isolated system, and start looking at what's feeding it. Because reservoirs don't create water. They store what the environment provides. For Canyon Lake, that supply depends heavily on rainfall across the Texas Hill Country and the flow of the Guadalupe River. When rainfall is consistent, even if levels drop temporarily, the system corrects itself. Water comes back in. The lake stabilizes. But over the past few years, that input has been steadily weakening. Rainfall across the region hasn't just been low in isolated seasons. It has been consistently below normal over multiple years, creating what hydrologists describe as a cumulative deficit. Each dry period doesn't fully reset before the next one begins. Instead, the shortage carries forward. By early 2026, parts of south-central Texas were already running significant rainfall deficits for the year, with some monitoring stations recording only a fraction of their expected totals. And this isn't happening on the edges of the system. It's happening at the center of the watershed that feeds the lake. At the same time, the output side of the system hasn't slowed down. Evaporation is one of the largest contributors to water loss in reservoirs, especially in Texas. As temperatures rise, the rate of evaporation increases. Warmer air pulls more moisture from the surface, and large, exposed bodies of water like Canyon Lake lose millions of gallons each day under sustained heat. This means the system is being pulled in two directions at once. Less water coming in from rainfall, more water leaving through evaporation, and there's a third pressure point layered on top of both: demand. Over the past 2 decades, the hill country has seen rapid population growth. Areas like New Braunfels and surrounding counties have expanded quickly as people move outward from cities like San Antonio and Austin. More homes, more infrastructure, more daily water use, all drawing from the same limited supply. Water managers have started responding to that pressure in ways that would have been unlikely before. In Comal County, a major water utility made the decision to deny service to multiple new housing developments, not because the land wasn't available, but because the water supply couldn't be guaranteed under current conditions. That kind of decision reflects a shift. The system is no longer just being managed, it's being constrained. And when a reservoir begins to lose stability under all three forces at once, reduced input, increased loss, and rising demand, the question changes. It's no longer about how low the lake can go. It becomes about whether the system can recover at all under the same conditions. Because in this region, there's already an example of what happens when that recovery stops. That example sits about 40 miles west. Medina Lake was once a fully functioning reservoir supporting irrigation, recreation, and local economies across the region. Like Canyon Lake, it relied on a balance, rainfall feeding into the system, water flowing out in controlled ways. For years, that balance weakened. Rainfall declined, evaporation increased, demand remained steady. At first, the changes looked manageable. Water levels dropped, but not beyond recovery. Seasonal patterns still held some structure, but over time, the recovery periods became shorter and less effective. Eventually, the system stopped correcting itself. By 2025, Medina Lake had fallen to just a few percent of its capacity. In technical terms, it reached what water managers call dead pool status, the point where water levels drop so low that it can no longer flow downstream through its normal outlets. The reservoir stops functioning as part of the broader water system. It doesn't disappear completely, but it stops working. That distinction matters because from a distance, the lake still exists. There is still water present, but the system it was designed to support, irrigation, flow management, supply, breaks down, and the effects move outward quickly. Farmers who once relied on Medina Lake had to shift entirely to groundwater. Businesses built around the lake, marinas, fishing, tourism, faced a different kind of uncertainty, not whether the lake would fluctuate, but whether it would return at all. What makes this relevant to Canyon Lake isn't just proximity, it's trajectory. Both lakes exist within the same regional climate system. Both depend on similar rainfall patterns. Both are exposed to the same rising temperatures and evaporation pressures. The difference is timing. Medina Lake reached a point where the system could no longer recover. Canyon Lake hasn't reached that point. It still holds more than half of its capacity. It still functions. But the pattern leading to that outcome, gradual imbalance, shorter recoveries, sustained losses, is already visible. And once a reservoir crosses that threshold, the shift is not immediate. It's structural. What makes this situation more complex isn't just the behavior of the lakes. It's everything built around them. Over the past 2 decades, the Texas Hill Country has changed. What was once a quieter, low-density region has become one of the fastest-growing areas in the state. Cities expanded outward, new communities formed, infrastructure followed that growth, and all of it was built on a simple assumption: that water would remain available. That assumption is now being tested. Utilities in parts of the region have already begun adjusting to that reality. In Comal County, water providers have delayed or denied new service commitments, not due to land or policy limitations, but because current supply cannot reliably support additional demand. At the same time, cities like San Marcos have implemented higher stage water restrictions, limiting how and when water can be used. These are not long-term projections. They are present-day responses. What this shows is that the pressure is no longer theoretical. It has moved into decision-making, into planning, into what can and cannot be built. And while those systems adjust, the physical system underneath them continues to shift. Canyon Lake still holds water. It still functions. But it is doing so under conditions that are no longer stable in the way they were designed to be. Less reliable input, higher sustained loss, increasing demand that doesn't pause when supply tightens. This is not a collapse, not yet. It is something quieter, a system that still works, but with less margin each year. And systems like that don't fail all at once. They narrow, slowly, until the point where recovery stops being part of the cycle. Canyon Lake hasn't reached that point, but it is closer to it than it used to be.